Daniel Ramirez never expected a small vegetable garden to turn him into the center of a neighborhood controversy. At 39 years old, Daniel worked long hours as a paramedic and spent most of his free time caring for his 8-year-old daughter, Sofia. Few people in the neighborhood knew that Sofia had a rare autoimmune condition that required a carefully controlled diet. Certain foods triggered painful symptoms and frequent hospital visits. After years of doctor appointments, medications, and trial-and-error meal plans, Daniel found that growing fresh vegetables at home helped manage both the cost and quality of Sofia's food. The garden wasn't large. It occupied a small section of Daniel's backyard and included tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, lettuce, and a few herbs. Everything was neatly maintained. Neighbors often complimented how organized it looked. Some even asked for gardening tips. For nearly 3 years, nobody complained. Then, Melissa Harper became HOA president. Melissa believed the neighborhood needed stricter enforcement of community standards. Within months, homeowners began receiving notices about minor issues that previous boards had ignored. Decorative flags, flower beds, and patio furniture suddenly became topics of discussion. Most residents found the changes frustrating but manageable. Daniel's situation became different when Melissa discovered his garden. One afternoon, he received a violation notice claiming that food-producing gardens were inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. The notice demanded removal of several raised garden beds within 30 days. Daniel initially assumed the issue could be resolved through a simple conversation. He contacted the HOA and explained why the garden existed. He described Sofia's medical condition and the importance of maintaining a reliable supply of fresh produce that met her dietary requirements. Melissa wasn't interested. She replied that personal circumstances couldn't override community standards. Daniel appealed. The appeal was denied. Then came a second notice, then a fine. As the dispute continued, Sofia began noticing the stress affecting her father. She often helped water the plants after school and viewed the garden as something special they shared together. When she overheard a conversation about possibly removing it, she became upset. One evening, she asked her father if they were going to lose the vegetables. Daniel didn't know how to answer. The conflict escalated during an HOA meeting attended by dozens of residents. Daniel presented photographs showing how well-maintained the garden was. He explained that the produce helped support his daughter's medical needs. Several homeowners spoke in his favor. Melissa remained unmoved. She argued that allowing exceptions would encourage other residents to install similar gardens.
A homeowner sitting near the back of the room asked why that would be a problem. Melissa responded that vegetable gardens didn't fit the image she wanted for the neighborhood. The comment immediately sparked criticism. Several residents pointed out that decorative landscaping consumed far more space while providing no practical benefit. Others questioned why an HOA would prioritize appearances over a child's health. Melissa ended the discussion without changing her position. Over the following months, the fines increased. The HOA threatened legal action. Daniel considered removing the garden simply to end the conflict. Then something unexpected happened. A local newspaper published an article about the dispute. The story focused on Sofia's condition and explained how the garden supported her dietary needs. Readers quickly connected with the situation. To many people, it seemed unreasonable that a homeowners association would target a father trying to care for a daughter. The article spread throughout social media. Community groups began discussing the case. Supportive messages poured in from strangers across the state. As public attention increased, residents within the neighborhood started speaking more openly about Melissa's leadership. Several homeowners shared stories about enforcement decisions that appeared inconsistent or unfair. One resident had been fined for installing a wheelchair-accessible pathway. Another described repeated conflicts over accommodations for an elderly parent. The complaints revealed a pattern.
Melissa often treated special circumstances as inconveniences rather than situations requiring compassion. The HOA board eventually found itself under growing pressure to review Daniel's case. Several board members privately examined enforcement records and discovered that other gardening-related structures had been allowed throughout the community without issue. Decorative raised flower beds existed on numerous properties. In some cases, homeowners had received explicit approval for installations very similar to Daniel's. The difference was that Daniel's garden produced food. The findings raised serious concerns about selective enforcement. A special HOA meeting was scheduled. The clubhouse was packed. Many attended specifically to support Daniel and Sofia. When the meeting began, several homeowners spoke passionately about common sense, fairness, and community values. Parents discussed the challenges of caring for children with medical conditions. Healthcare workers explained the importance of nutrition in managing chronic illnesses. Then the board presented its review. The investigation revealed multiple inconsistencies in how gardening-related rules had been enforced. Similar structures had been approved elsewhere in the neighborhood. Several enforcement actions against Daniel appeared unsupported by previous HOA decisions. The evidence was difficult to ignore. Melissa attempted to defend her actions by claiming she was protecting property values. The explanation failed to persuade the crowd. Several residents openly questioned whether property values were more important than a child's well-being. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. For the first time since the conflict began, it became clear that Melissa no longer had the support of the community. Within weeks, she resigned as HOA president. The HOA canceled every fine issued against Daniel and formally approved the garden. The board also adopted new guidelines requiring accommodation requests and special circumstances to receive greater consideration before enforcement actions could proceed. For Daniel, however, the most meaningful moment happened months later. The neighborhood organized a community harvest event in a local park. Families brought homemade dishes, baked goods, and fresh produce to share. Daniel was invited to participate. Sofia helped prepare vegetables from the very garden that nearly disappeared. As neighbors gathered beneath picnic shelters and children played nearby, dozens of residents stopped to thank Daniel for standing his ground. Some admitted they never realized how important the garden was until the story became public. Others said the controversy had reminded them what a community should actually represent. As the afternoon continued, Sofia proudly showed visitors the vegetables she helped grow. She smiled more than Daniel had seen in months. Watching her laugh with friends and neighbors, he realized the fight had never truly been about gardening. It had been about dignity. It had been about understanding that rules should serve people, not the other way around. As the sun slowly began to set behind the park, Daniel sat at a picnic table surrounded by conversation and laughter. Sofia sat nearby sharing tomatoes from the family garden with other children. For the first time in a very long while, the future felt simple again. The garden remained exactly where it belonged, and the community had learned that compassion grows far better than control ever could.